I'd like to round out our little tour of some visual illusions with this old chestnut. This is surely the most boring visual illusion ever. It was in children's books 100 years ago. The Müller-Lyer Illusion looks like this. There's two lines with branching points on either end. Surprise, surprise, the two lines are not the same length, even though they appear to be the same length. Wow. You're not impressed. Okay, let's have a closer look at this one. Why do we see the two central lines as not being the same length? Well, these are remarkably simple shapes, aren't they? They're clear, contrasting, bold lines. And so, for a long time, it was assumed that there was something about the low-level properties of the visual system, where the visual system is, as it were, dealing with things like contrasts and edges, that were responsible for this. But then a suspicion began to arise that this might have something to do with culture rather than with biology. You see, we have edges around us in our rooms, in our environment, on tables and desks and doors and windows. Our human engineered world is full of edges that come together at right angles. And so this inspired a very famous study, I think this was in the 1960s, in which this standard illusion was tested on a bunch of people, for once not from America, not from the classrooms of American psychological departments, which is where most psychology experiments have been done, which is problematic. Instead, most of these communities were in Africa, and they led a wide range of lives. And the way you administered this test is you show the illusion, and then you figure out how much you would have to stretch the apparently shorter line to make it look the same length as the top line. That's called the point of subjective equality. And the results for various groups are shown in the plot at the bottom. Black lines for adults, open bars for children. That difference doesn't even bother us. If you look at the second entry from the right, it's Evanston. Evanston is a rich suburb of Chicago where Northwestern University is, which has housed very, very many such psychology experiments. And the size of the effect there is very large. That's the high bar. Very, very large effect. But you can see that the different groups that were sampled in Africa did not all display the same height, and as you go down from right to left, you eventually reach the South African miners and the San Bushman of the Kalahari Desert, for whom the effect doesn't exist. That's a peculiar thing. Why would some people have it and others not? Well, I'm going to come back to the nature of the environment in which you live. If you are spending an awful lot of time underground in rough mines, or you're a bushman of the Kalahari Desert, you are not surrounded by walls and windows and tables and desks. This is what our environment looks like, and it's secretly full of these kinds of signs. It's full of points at which edges, smooth planes, come together at right angles, generating edges where the Müller-Lyer configuration is actually a reliable cue to depth. So you can see, for example, on the left, this is a corner, recessed. You could go into this corner. And on the right, you can see that this is a room jutting out. You cannot go in. So the different configurations which are stylized in the Müller-Lyer illusion generate an illusion for very good reason, because those kinds of figures function as reliable cues to depth perception in the world of some people. Most humans, but by no means all. That's an interesting lesson there. Now, I'm sure you've seen these things on the web. These are called CAPTCHAs, and they are little tests to see, are you human or are you a bot? And they usually involve trying to squint and read, make out some very, very damaged letters and numbers. These ones are particularly easy to read, aren't they? JUGQL Q7L. But you don't see these kind of simple tests anymore. They went away a few years ago. Now you either see very complicated tests or the tests go elsewhere. Why is that? Well, the answer is that computer programs have been written to analyze images. And initially, they were unable to make out the letters and numbers, which were obvious to a human who knows all about letters and numbers, were very difficult for these programs to figure out. And this led to an arms race. On the one side, you have the professional spammers, the pirates, porn merchants and such like, developing routines which try to figure out what the letters and numbers in these kinds of displays are. And on the other side, you've got the people trying to protect their websites, trying to make these ever more difficult, until it got to the stage that humans couldn't read the damn things, but computers could. So that's kind of weird. We've learned quite a lot from computational approaches to vision, but the manner in which a computer analyzes an image is by no means comparable to what happens when a human encounters a picture. We see with a lot of knowledge. So it was the built-in knowledge of numbers and letters, these familiar forms, that made these originally easy for humans to read and difficult for computers. So one way to think of this, a popular way to think of this, is that what you see emerges out of an interaction of bottom-up processes, that is, those that start with changing patterns of light and dark on the retina. They provide information about edges, contrasting elements, things moving. You can begin to construct a representation of shape from shading, and so on. So this is all, as it were, starting with a pixel and moving towards meaning. But also at play in vision is our knowledge of the world, our understanding. And we always see with our understanding, as well as whatever pattern of light is around us. So we have our expectations. We've already seen the role of attention in seeing. And your knowledge of the world, as we saw with the Müller-Lyer illusion, influences what you see. I hope I can demonstrate to you that what you know influences what you see in the following way. Here's an image, and if you haven't seen it before, you may not be able to recognize, to make a coherent interpretation of this image. But now I'm going to show you something, and then I'm going to look at this image again. There's what I'm going to show you, a frog. Now you see this image completely differently, because you now have a means of making it coherent because of your prior experience. Here's another old chestnut. I'm really reaching down to the bottom of the barrel here, haven't I? The bistable Necker cube. You've seen this before, and you're aware that the same visual stimulus can be seen in two different ways. Let me show you the two different ways. That's not quite right, but it's almost right. I think you can get it. You can see this cube in two ways, and you can switch between the two visual interpretations at will. So this is showing you that what you see is not a function just of what's there. In this particularly simple case, you can force an interpretation between two different ways of understanding the cube. Here's a more modern variant of this, and this was developed by a student of mine, Stuart Jackson. And this is a display of point lights attached to a person who's walking, and you have to imagine this person is on a turntable, like a record player. Who does that? Now, if you were looking down on this person from above, would they be going clockwise or counterclockwise? Fact of the matter is, the display doesn't tell you. Much like the Necker cube, there's two ways to view this. You can see someone going clockwise, or you can see someone going counterclockwise. See if you can make this switch with your eyes only, in the power of your mind. This is quite difficult. I find it easier to focus on something like the shoulders, get them going the other way, and then the whole body flips around. You can play with that yourself then thereafter. Right, some take-home messages from all this. Now, we started off talking about perception. Unfortunately, nearly everything we had to say was about vision. There's a lot to say about other sensory modalities, but by far the most work in the study of human perception has been done in the visual area. And we've seen a few things that might not have occurred to you immediately when we're talking about vision. First off, vision is purposeful. We saw that in the integration of perception and action in the box jellyfish larva. We saw that in the role of attention in inattentional blindness. And we saw there's many, many reasons why the obviously appealing metaphor of the eye and the camera should be taken with a grain of salt. And you can review those reasons yourself, but central here is the notion of change and activity. And we saw, through various theoretical lenses, we saw that the word vision refers to a couple of different capacities maybe. So with the dual stream interpretation, we saw that vision is the means by which we don't bump into lampposts, but it's also the means by which we recognize and identify things in the world. And we saw that the visual system expects a world with particular properties, and so it can be fooled by creating situations which would never normally occur and certainly not reliably occur in the real world. We saw the particular role of static monocular vision in all this. And with these last illusions, we saw the ways in which our culture and our personal history can shape what it is that we see. So because of this role of the understanding, expectation, and attention, we don't all necessarily see the same thing. You're familiar with maybe looking at the same scene as someone else, and one thing pops out to you and something else pops out to them. This is entirely normal. So that wraps up our little foray into the vast territory of perception.